Uh-oh. Hold on. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Hola, Sarita. Hold on, everyone. I don't like the balance on this. Hang on tight. Close your eyes. Close your eyes tight. I am going to just slide you down a little bit. Hey, Catherine. There we are. There we are. It's a fine line. Good morning, Martine. Hello, everyone around the world. Hi, Tish. Hi, Marcia. It's lovely to have people on board. Good morning. Hi, Robert. Annie. So, for all of you, hi, Helen. Hi, Jean. So, really, I am more or less repeating my tour from last night, but again, it was time zone. So, and I just think it's really, really a significant thing. My God, really a significant place in the world that I am here. Look at that gorgeous morning light. So, even if you did join me last night, hi, Maddie, I will be repeating quite a lot of what we talked about, but the light is totally different this morning and it's spectacular. And so I wanted to share this again. Good, Elise. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't met me before, my name's Patrick Toomey. I am not from here, but I am definitely, to an extent, culturally from here. I live about 4.5 hours, nearly 5 hours north of here. So, hi, Poppy. I live, obviously, hey, Sue, in Banff National Park in the Canadian Rockies. Now, I am not there right now, of course. I am down in the United States of America. I am in the state of Montana. The state of Montana. Yeah, Tish, it's not far. I'm straight south. I am in a macro sense, in a macro sense, I feel as though I'm with sort of my people because we live in the front ranges of the Rocky Mountains. Um, so anyway, basically, that's who I am. If you're totally new here to, well, you'll see Marilyn in a minute. If you're totally new here to Hago, by the way, this is a little bit like YouTube Live. There's a live chat. I am going to be putting up some photos. Bonjour, Daniel. I'm going to be putting up some photos in here, and I'll try and warn you so that the chat, so you have a chance to look at it. But I am down in a really unique place. So obviously, I'm in the state of Montana. It's the fourth largest state in the United States, but it's the eighth smallest by population, just over 1 million people. Put that in perspective. Great Falls, which I believe is the largest city in Montana right now, is still over 100 miles south of here, 160, 170 kilometers south here. And the city of Calgary is about 200, I'm trying to do miles because I'm in the States, so I'm being a grown up, but 250 miles north of here, 300 and something kilometers. And that's really the biggest urban conglomeration in the entire area. So that's sort of where I am in the world. But I am looking down towards Glacier National Park. Eliane, bonjour. But I'm trying to decide, but let me show you actually just where I am to put in some perspective, because I could say that I'm just south of Alberta, I can say I'm in Montana, I can say I'm in the United States, but really where I am right now is I am on the Blackfeet Nation. And it is an honor to be here. I grew up around well, on my side of the border, we'd say Blackfoot, but I grew up around Blackfoot people down in the south of Alberta. There are four linguistic groups that make up the nation. So you have Siksika up near Calgary, Kainai or Blood down north of Cardston towards Lethbridge, and then Piegan. And here we are in the land of the South Piegan. So this is the fourth dialect. Now, here in the Blackfeet Nation, this reservation, and again, it says Indian Agency. As I say, I always, as a Canadian, I always have this sort of glottal stop when I say the word Indian because it is a pejorative term in my world, but it is still used down here, and that's fine. I'm not here. I'm not here to tell people how to be themselves or talk about themselves. But this is a map up here of the reservation. Now, the reservation is up in the very north and the northwest of Montana, but is a massive area, 1.5 million acres. That's 2.3 thousand square miles. It was negotiated basically in 1896, which is very, very late. The idea of a reservation in the United States was actually a prisoner of war camp. So let's be very honest about that. But by 1896, it was negotiated to be the entire east slope of the Rocky Mountains. And then the west slope was given to the Kootenay, and in between was Glacier National Park. Now, I'm beside the Museum of the Plains Indian here, but that's not really what I want to curve around. I just want to show you this morning light. There we are. This morning, I'm going to be driving down with my group towards East Glacier and right around to West Glacier. Look at those mountains in the distance this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, T&G. By the way, my friends Terry and Jolene are here, and I know they love this part of the world. It is, in Fahrenheit, 42 degrees this morning. Now, 42 degrees in my language is chilly. I'm really not very good at Fahrenheit. But to make the point, I'm still in my sandals this morning. So, it's nice. Cool. The mountains are fantastic. There's two ranges that come down into Glacier National Park. That is the Lewis Range, well, the Lewis Fault. It's a single fault. If you imagine, a lot of that rock there is 1.5, 1.3, 1.5 billion years old. A single thrust of old rock sitting on top of new rock that crumpled the earth up, created the rolling foothills, and then the flat plains. I'll show you the plains in a little while. This area, so Glacier National Park, let me come back to it for a second. Glacier National Park in the distance leads up to Waterton Lakes National Park in Alberta in Canada. Together, so Waterton's the fifth of the 5 Rocky Mountain National Parks in Canada. Glacier was the 10th national park in the United States, but it's the one true limestone Rockies National Park. But we actually call this the apex of the continent. So it gets very narrow through a few places here. This is what we say when we say the apex of the continent. This is the true continental divide. Now, in a few days' time, I will be crossing the continental divide 3 times in one day down in Yellowstone. It's fantastic. But this is where on one side, and we're in the very, very dry brown side here. This is like being in Argentina, Patagonia. The other side, and later on today, I will see hemlock trees, ponderosa pine trees, Flathead Lake, which is the largest body of water west of the Missouri in the United States. So they are. They're using the word Indian, and that was the Indian Act. But here, and I want to walk out the plains a little bit with you here. Yeah, these are the Blackfeet people. They're called Blackfoot. Hi, Sandra. Blackfoot in Alberta, but their territory is massive. And when I say massive, let me find an image. So please don't put up anything in the chat for the moment here. I'll try and put one up. Let me see. So you can see those are the reservations in Alberta, or the reserves in Canada, and you can see the reservation where I am now just south of the border, and the green area there is the national park. Now, if I put that in some perspective, I think I have another image here. I think this one. Sorry, it's a little hard for me to see them in the morning here. Well, anytime. What was Blackfoot territory was bigger than France, for example, historically. Now, the other thing I'd like to ask people is don't just immediately go, hi, Lynn, hugs to you, good morning. Please don't go to Wikipedia necessarily. Wikipedia says that the people here on the Blackfeet Reservation have been here since the 1700s, and then later on they acknowledge that they have an oral tradition going back 10,000 years. So again, it's very important to audit everything we read. These cultures historically were not horse cultures, although the horse is incredibly important now. Horses came back to the Americas. Yes, they were here once upon a time, but they came back to the Americas with the Spanish in about 1536 down in Mexico. The horse arrived here before probably anyone here ever met a European face. That's great, Martine. But they traveled with dogs. They traveled with dogs historically. They used, of course, teepees. I mean, so many of the images you have of indigenous people in North America are really built around the Blackfoot or the Blackfeet people specifically, right? And I think it's really important to acknowledge that because these genuinely were people with headdresses and teepees, and they hunted. And what did they hunt? Well, they hunted bison. It is said that there is no culture on earth as tied to a single species as the Blackfeet were to the bison. And Blackfoot culture, as we know it today, basically came to a stumbling collapse in 1877 when Treaty 7 was signed in Canada, and then 1896 when the reservation was established here in Montana. But in real terms, we have a very specific date of 1881 with the collapse of the bison as an animal. Now, I cannot stress this enough. the North American bison. Well, you could say buffalo; it won't hurt its feelings, but that buffalo is an African animal. But the North American bison lived from about south of the Edmonton Saskatoon line down in the plains, all the way down to areas like Missouri in the United. All of this great here. There were somewhere between 40 and 60 million animals. The bison is an incredible animal, but the plains bison was effectively by 1881 wiped off the presence of this continent of ours. Now the bison was used for everything, and just north of here, and I stopped there yesterday, was head smashed in buffalo jump, the largest food harvest in the world until the Industrial Revolution. Now here's the creation story. Why this is interesting. Well, it's interesting because it's obviously fascinating, but Napi is the name that comes up as the creator. And it's interesting because we have creation stories, of course, well, all over the world, right? Just about every people on earth. But Napi is also considered a trickster. This was a warlike culture in the sense that they were called warriors, but it really wasn't and isn't. You were actually judged as fundamentally, you were judged here on your generosity. So people lived in bands, even though they still down here in the States use the term tribes and tribal culture, but they lived in bands, and the bands would be 80 to 240 people, so 20 to 40 lodges, which would be the teepees. The teepees are just so brilliant for this climate. Very windy. You can all probably hear a little bit of wind now. But a band would elect or nominate a leader based on skill, and their leadership was literally the ability to unite people. But if a band was having trouble with food or safety, they would disband and you would move in with other people. So there was a huge fluidity. The Siksika, and all of these people fall under the Siksika tradition. The Siksika, which are up near Calgary, are considered the true Blackfoot, and all of these other ones are dialectic, but they understand each other historically. But this is the Southern Pagan right here. Amsapikpikani, right there. So that's the part of the world I'm in. So it is a meaningful identity. There are about 55,000 people who identify as Blackfoot. This reservation has, in terms of membership, about 16,000 people. Here, Browning's the main town. Browning was named after a director of the Department of Indian Affairs, which goes all the way back to 1824. The Department of Indian Affairs in the United States actually replaced the Department of War, which is in charge. But there's about 1,000, 1,200 people here. Although I was told that so many people will not participate in the censuses here that population might be nearly twice the size. I think that's really fascinating. I can't vitiate that number, but it fascinates me. Now, I want to try a zoom here because this is a long way out, but you'll see one mountain out there with a flat top on it. Gosh, I feel like phoning my mom and waking her up. My mom grew up looking at that mountain. That is Chief Mountain right there. That is the border with Canada in the distance. That is on the US side, but by about 0.01 of a degree. So when you're in Waterton, you look south, you see that mountain. And it honestly does look like a great leader with a headdress. So it's a fabulous mountain. I'm on full zoom to get up there, but it is just such a spectacular sight to see that. So we're looking up. That is it's about 60 miles away. So kudos to Hago for having such a fabulous zoom on that. And I'm sorry, I still have a tiny slant in the camera, but I don't want to go and play with it. I feel badly, but I think it probably bothers me more than it bothers you. There are faces, and in fact, it is believed, so there's something like 72 lakes in the national park. Only about 20 of them are named. But St. Mary, and I stopped down at St. Mary yesterday on the way here. I'll show you a little sky from St. Mary yesterday. So that would be the east entrance into the park. It was a cloudy, rainy day. This is much more a typical sky for this part of the world, much more the way it is normally here. But I stopped down there to show it to the group because, of course, they cannot do the Logan Pass or the Going to the Sun Road because it's still so full of snow. Now, the snowpack here is just fantastic. Why I think that's good is in the national park, in Glacier National Park, 1964-63 was the only year in its history where there were not fires. And we have had Um, oh, did you, Marilyn? I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I have a couple of other photos I'd like to show. One, and I think is really, really relevant, and you can certainly upload these and read them. There's so many interesting plaques around. Now I'm walking out in this dry land, and say the only other place in the world that I know this. I haven't been to Mongolia, but I feel like you might see this sort of step here in Mongolia. But this is what it feels like over in Argentine Patagonia in the south. Like if you go to Bariloche and you drive out and you leave the mountains, you come into this dry land. Now, this is very green for how it normally is here. I'm going to be driving down that road later today. I shouldn't say I'm going to be driving. My driver, Al, will be driving. But we're going to drive around the south here. And literally we'll come around to a big monument, a Lewis and Clark monument. But again, so many of these stories, it's not that I discount Lewis and Clark or David Thompson, but remember, these people have been living here for 10,000 years. Um, Now we know, but I'll be driving around, and when I hit that monument, I'm going to transition from this dry land to suddenly forest. And by this afternoon, not even by this, by 11 o'clock this morning, I'm going to be in amongst ponderosa pine trees. In fact, just out of fun, there's some very thin ponderosa trees up here. But I'll be in amongst big old growth ponderosa trees, and I'll be amongst hemlock trees. I mean, the whole ecosystem will change, and I will be in the land of the Kootenai people, or as we would call them, Cooktaxa people, who come down the Columbia River, and I'll be heading down to Flathead Lake, that area. Now, they were, yes, they do, Robin, and there is actually a free movement of people apparently across the border. So that's a great question, Robin. Because the Blackfeet are, of course, linguistically and culturally, they're more linked, as I say. I'm in the United States now. I was in Alberta yesterday, but to me, I'm on the Blackfoot Nation. So just over here, by the way, is the Blackfoot Veterans Park, and I think it's very significant to acknowledge that yesterday was Memorial Day in the United States, and of course, the contribution of Indigenous people in the military actions of these other cultures, these imperial cultures, is just disproportionate. And they came back from service, particularly in World War I, and came back into a reservation system where they needed a permit to leave the territory. Can you imagine? And of course didn't achieve suffrage till decades later. So it is amazing to me, and I made a point yesterday, and I'd like to repeat the point, but it is worth repeating, that it's easy to focus on the negative, and there are real negatives here. So here on this reservation, 30-odd% live below the national poverty line. Unemployment may float as high as 60%, but that is an exaggerated number because one has to see employment in different terms. Most people here have cattle. They're a herding population. So again, I don't, yeah, it's just so easy to generalize. But nevertheless, populations here were devastated by plagues, Canada was worse, their residential school system, but the intentional elimination of culture. But I do strongly believe a corner has been turned now where populations are growing, education's growing, and frankly, this is their land and they can do with their land what they want. And that's a basic act of sovereignty. So again, it's easy to focus, and it's pretty run down. I really don't want to focus too much. This is a very, very windy place, but you'll notice on this person's home over here, they have tires on the roof. Well, someone asked me yesterday, well, why would they go and put tires on the roof? Well, because roofs are expensive. You put a tire and it stops your house, your roof from blowing away. It seems like a pretty logical thing to me, right? But of course, reservations are run as bands. They have collective ownership, so you don't tend to see your home as directly as an investment the way you might in a place where you buy and sell homes. Now, I also think that's okay, Marilyn. But it is weird, Marilyn, because I've done that too. It was funny. I was on Cyrus tour the other night, and I couldn't leave a tip on the phone. But that's all right. But well, and Joanne, I guess where I want to say this, by the way, this museum goes back to the 1940s, so very, very early. And I've never ever been in it. I was trying to add up last night. I think I've been to Browning 18 times, and I've never been in this museum, so I cannot speak to it. It's always closed when I come here. But I would expect it would be full of iconography because based on the pictures down in the southeast of this massive state. I mean, Montana's fabulous, and it is huge, and it is big sky country, as you can see all over. But down in the southeast, of course, is the Crow Nation, and that's where Custer's last stand was. You might know. Yeah, if ever, and again, everyone is welcome on my tours, whether you can tip or not. I mean, everyone is always welcome. But if it never works, you can always do this leave a coffee thing on my website too. But over here, you have some image. Oh, by the way, it's interesting. If you're in the eastern U.S., they clearly don't have black and white magpies because people always ask me what's that bird. But these are the magpies out here in the front ranges, the Rocky Mountains there. And there's actually a Stony story that the magpie was so mischievous that the chief picked it up and banged it either side on the rocks, and those are the white patches. So, but they're just lovely to see. But I want to wander down a little bit here. It is, by the way, quite cold. Now I have to, I'm going to stick to my time today just because I have to pack up and get going. There's my tour coach out there, TCS. My driver, Al, who's been a friend for years, is from northern Saskatchewan. He's Métis as well. So if you're familiar with the the Métis culture was born out on those plains through, of course, the fur trade. And the fur trade was so significant because generally it was European men, Indigenous women. But the Blackfeet culture, as I say, really doesn't collapse as its 10,000 year history until the collapse of the bison population. Now, yesterday I crossed the border north of here near Cardston at Carway. Normally I come over by Chief Mountain, which I showed you earlier, but that crossing is still closed. Crossed over, and within 2 minutes of being south, there was a herd of bison. Now, generally, the bison you meet today have been reintroduced as being woodland bison. And the woodland bison live up north, but the plains bison, can you imagine 40 to 60 million animals? Now, north of here is Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump. And, excuse me, and of course, these people hunted the bison. And they hunted the bison right there in those sort of valleys you see in the distance. And those valleys were perfect. Lots of dogs around here, and they're all friendly. But they hunted the bison down to these valleys because they would drive them up into the valleys, or they would run them off cliffs. Now, the bison, you could use their fur, you could use their meat. For anyone who's North American, I think you're familiar with beef jerky, the dried salted beef, but I know for Europeans, it's a bit of a foreign taste. I grew up with it. You know, my great grandparents homesteaded just north of here. So Cardston is 62 miles north of us. That's 100 kilometers. And that is over on the Alberta side of the border. And they would have dug into the ground to preserve their food. And now, again, it's cooling off here. By the way, I'm just going to show you this advertisement here. I know it's sort of funny, but Whitefish, Montana, is a pretty famous ski resort. It's over again on the other side. So 93 miles. That's what it takes to go from basically Browning on this one side, Whitefish and Kalispell, the main communities around on the other side here. In the distance, the main entrance into the park, East Glacier on the side, is 12 miles away, and West Glacier, which is what I'm driving around to this morning, is 68. But bison is, John, it's a great question. So I eat a lot of bison. Bison is leaner, very, very low in cholesterol. It's a very healthy meat. If you make a burger, you actually need to mix in a bit of beef fat to make it stay together. Now, I know people are vegetarian and vegan on board, but this is a culture. This is a, yeah, I've skied there many times, right? But this is a culture, really, you're not going to live off the land here without, and of course, it was incredibly respectful towards the animals. The collapse of the bison population had nothing to do with these people who lived with them for 10,000 years. I'm just showing you this road sign here, the distance. So there's Kalispell, around the other side, 101 miles. So when I drive around here this morning, I'm going to cross over this incredible coulee formation, and I just know where to pull in. I'd love to take a photo for all of you. But look at this. This is literally where the prairies meet the mountains. This is technically high desert, although the snowpack this year is really spectacular. In fact, it is stunning. Hey, Chloe, sorry, I didn't even see it. I don't think I've ever seen it this snowy this late in the year down here. So the Going to the Sun Road, considered one of those most beautiful, one of those 10 most beautiful drives in the world. The Rockies are a real winner for that because, of course, we have the Icefields Parkway too. Um, I bet you it's closed until at least the middle of June because that snowpack is just stunning through there. So these huge valleys. So the St. Mary Lake, I don't think I got a good photo yesterday of the lake because it wasn't great weather, but I do want to show you a view post. This is how the Blackfeet would have traveled once horses were up here. So they would use, thanks, Dave, they would use the poles with which they would build the teepees, of course. Now, that was a 2006 forest fire. So there's only been 1 year in the park that hasn't had a fire, but the fires have been really intense the last number of years. And I am just really sad. This is the only time this year that I'm doing this tour. I'm starting up uh, oh, yes, they are, Paula. Great question. But this one, I'm ending all the way down in Salt Lake City. I'm really following the range of mountains. So if we talk about the Rocky Mountains in a macro sense, thanks, Pat. You're starting up by the Yukon or even the Alaska border, way up in the north there. You come right down here to this apex hump, this single fault line that's Glacier and Waterton Lakes. But they carry on down to, of course, they get to be nearly 400 miles wide in the Colorado region, and they really terminate down probably New Mexico. Now, these are actually the Canadian Rockies as a single formation, and they terminate really down by that southern peak in the distance there. That's really where the true limestone formation of the one direct line, and then we start to move into this metamorphic rock. Cheryl, it is so beautiful. However, I'd like to come back to Paula's question because it's a very good question, but Paula, I want to say like it's a very, very cursory response to a massive question. But there's the Department of Indian Affairs that oversees something like 2.5 or 3 million people. It's based in Washington, of course. The leader is Daryl something or rather at the moment. I did actually Google him the other day, and he is Indigenous. I think he's from North Dakota. So some of these states, it's very important. The states with the largest Indigenous population, in sheer numbers, is California, but as a percentage of population are places like South Dakota, New Mexico, Montana, Alaska, of course. The Alaskan rules are different because, of course, Russia sold Alaska to the United States. And in doing so, and we're talking, thanks, Tia, I'm so happy to share with you, but Russia insisted that Indigenous people would be provided with health care. So it's the only state where there's actually like collective or socialized health care for at least part of the population. That's not true, actually, because Hawaii has it as well. But they are self-governing insofar as reservations are semi-autonomous. Now, a reserve in Canada was set aside by the Indian Act to civilize the people. I am not making this up. A reservation in the United States is a prisoner of war camp, right? And so the area that belonged to these people historically, I thought I had a map. Sorry, I don't think I have one, but is just such a massive territory as to say you could drop France into it. No, I've already put this picture up. I'll put it up once again. So you're looking up north towards Edmonton there and south here. I mean, that is a just a massive, massive area, right? And so that is, again, they're big, deep conversations. And I want to, and as I said before, I've started this road trip, I want to tread lightly on some of these subjects because they're not my conversations per se. But as I promised last night, because of course I was staying in this very nice hotel right over here, Glacier Peaks, right? Um, and I came back, and I mean, I hadn't been back for 2 years, and I walked in the door, and they said, "Oh, hey, you're back!" Like, lovely, friendly, warm, but I've never ever gone in to have a beer there because they smoked, and they've ended smoking in there. So I went in, and I got chatting with people again, and they've said it was interesting. So they actually said to me last night that normally they crossed over the border, but during COVID they locked down here, so it was obviously very important. And I understand the lockdowns on reserves and reservations because these people, as cultures, absolutely know what pandemics are. 1792 was the first wave. 1860s, over in British Columbia, 90% of the indigenous population was wiped out by smallpox. Like these are factual realities. These people understand what it means. Now, it's a lot easier to lock down in a place like this because you have so much land. But look at these prairie grasses out here. Now, this land is not deeply deforested. I went through yesterday. I took an old back road. Unfortunately, say my driver Al, trust me. And it is a windy, small road. But we saw 3 dozen beaver lodges as we came through. I didn't see a moose yesterday. I thought I would. Um, but it is just a vast, deep land. But this is what the true prairie in North America would look like. Now, I'm actually in the Porcupine rolling foothills here, and the prairie goes the other way. And when you try and put it in some sort of perspective, and I know it's hard to put in perspective, I could drive east here for about, now again, I'm going to try and talk in miles, about 400 miles to get across Montana into North Dakota. Then when you get across North Dakota, another 300 miles. Please don't trust my numbers 100%. Then you get over into that kind of Wisconsin, Minnesota area where it suddenly gets more lakey, right? But if you went south from here, if I go down this way and I go south and east, you can actually follow these plains all the way down to Texas. Now it gets hotter, right? But it doesn't necessarily get drier. In Oklahoma, it does. Other places less so. It is, and this is why this is, look at this, big sky country in the truest sense of the word. All right, now big sky country, so all of Montana is a massive, massive state, and about a little less than 1.1 million people. The western side of it is mountain country, and as I was mentioning, Whitefish, of course, beautiful ski hill there. Oh, its whole market's basically Calgary and Edmonton, who come down here. But Great Falls is 100 miles south of here, 110 miles south of here. Biggest city out in the prairies. Billings is down in the southeast, but there's a lot of native land out here. And I've mentioned before, I have a friend who is who's a guide down at Little Bighorn, and she's Crow, and she's brilliant. And I've told her about Hago, but just not her thing. But I would love. I don't know when I'm going to get down there, but I wouldn't. I would only do a tour if I brought her along with me. And look at this. There's actually so much life out around here. You just don't necessarily see it at first. But this is what the true Great Plains. So the whole city or town of Browning is maybe 1,500 people built into what is basically a section, and it's isolated. So the economy's been tough that way, but there is some natural gas, there's some oil, a little bit of lumber, and of course there's a ton of roadworks because of the national park. So now, I mean, I love everyone and everyone's welcome, but my friends Terry and Jolene have spent a lot of time up here. This is about the best I'm going to do for you for Glacier Park. I would love to offer a view over on the other side of it, but I just am not going to get the reception out there or the time. Now, I am eventually ending up in Missoula tonight. Tomorrow, I've put up a tour midday, and I wanted to kind of keep it a surprise, but I don't think it's going to be not going to be a great surprise. So I'm going to be in I think, one of the most interesting cities in certainly Montana, if not the Western U.S. But I will try my best to maybe tonight put up a tour in Missoula, or tomorrow morning is what I would love to do. Why I'm waffling on it is every time I've ever been to Missoula, I climb up to the big M up back of the university. By the way, there's rodeo grounds right over here. Um, but now the hotel that I'm in, and it's like 4 miles away. So please do keep an eye out or set your alerts, because if I put up a tour, it'll be pretty last minute once I get down there. But today, with this spectacular scenery, I'm going to drive around the bottom there. I will probably see, just to tease you even more, I will probably see mountain goats as I drive around the south end. That is the image of Glacier Park. And I'll go around to West Glacier. I'm going to drive in to Lake McDonald, which again, all the Canadians on board, I'll think, oh yeah, McDonald, Johnny McDonald, Agnes McDonald. It wasn't. It was a fur trader. Duncan McDonald had carved his name in a tree. And when the Great Northern Train came through here, and the Great Northern Train is right here, and they started to build fancy hotels the way the Canadians did to pay for the train. Then they said, oh, this must be Lake McDonald. So that's why it's got its name. But it's 10 miles long, so not very rich in nutrients because it's so cold. The lakes up in the national park never really get things, Katie. The lakes never get above 50 degrees. No, yeah, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius. I really do try with the Fahrenheit. I apologize to all my American friends. Look at this light down through here, and there are birds singing to me. Whenever I walk out on the plains here, I'm watching not for ticks, although they are here. I'm watching for gopher holes. But have a look at this view here. And so that's the way I'm just gonna. It is Elm, c'est incroyable. They have blizzards here. There's tons of snow. Although this is a natural wind tunnel. You can probably hear it on me here. And the wind comes down this east slope. Now, as I say, I'll try and put up some photos into our camper van group on the other side, because the other side of these mountains is lush. I'm going to be driving along the Middle Fork River today. I bet you the water's huge because we're getting above freezing, and so this snow is starting to melt. Um, and it's a whole different. So the people on the other side had access to protein because of this sockeye salmon, or the kokanee salmon, the landlocked sockeye. This side was all bison, and they traded. Now the Peigan down here did come a little bit later as they migrated south, but the Picanee, which are a little further north, and this is linguistically Picanee as well, they actually controlled the fur trade here for about 100 years. Now, when Montana was opened up with the Great Northern Railway, then came in the whiskey traders. And that is where, and once again, I don't want to generalize and talk solely about alcoholism and all the different problems that show up on reservation life. But the whiskey trade is the reason why the Northwest Mounted Police came out to monitor the border between ourselves. Oh, Lynn, there's a majesty to this. Now, if you can remember, I cannot remember his name, and I'm sorry, I had Googled it. The actor who was in Dances with Wolves, not the white guy, not Kevin Costner, but the indigenous guy, was actually born here in Browning. So Browning has produced a very famous actor. I'm just not good with actors' names. But yes, this is just a spectacular. I'm really sorry that there's a little slant in the camera today. It just couldn't quite get the balance, but this is where, and one day I will take all of you to Patagonia and you'll see these same views as well from Bariloche. But it is such an honor to be standing out here in Blackfeet land and Blackfeet Nation with this cold wind blowing up here. My group are Americans, Neil. Um, and Tish, that doesn't ring a bell, but yeah. Yeah, no, my group are Americans. They flew into Canada. I have people I have quite a few Texans on this trip, and I get lots of New England, people from the East who haven't been out here. This is an itinerary, honestly, so keep your eyes peeled. I know a few people have already messaged me. I will do one of my own, but you start up in the Banff area, of course, and you see the Rockies, and then basically the next 4 or 5 days, I will cross the Continental Divide 7 times. No, not Graham Greene. um, but I will cross the Continental Divide back and forth. Today I will get down to 5 valleys that come together where Missoula, Montana is, and then tomorrow I will go up into the copper mining areas and all of the effect that has built up around the fact that you have the largest pimple on Earth about 6 hours south of here, which is the super volcano of Yellowstone. As I say, I will meet on, I guess it's the 2nd of June. I will meet up with our beloved friend Asia, who is really, I deserve whatever happens over the next 20 or 30 years of this virtual life. She was one of the pioneers on here, and we've become really quite close. And we're going to meet up in Mammoth Hot Springs. Unfortunately, where she lives and where I'm staying are like, 2.5 hours drive away. But we'll meet up. And so the tour will be on her channel. I mean, out of just nothing else, out of sheer respect, I want it to be on her channel. So that'll be cheap. But look at the prairie here. So this here will flatten out, and you go over about 2 steps as you go east, and then it flattens out. And then by the time, of course, you get to the Dakotas, aside from the Black Hills area, it is just flat as a pancake. Thanks, Martine. So, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, I'll curve this around. There is Glacier Park behind me in all of it. No, it's not Graham Greene. It's a different name, but I'll find it. There is so much more to cover here. As I said before I came here, I want to tread lightly because this is not my culture, but boy, oh boy, do I respect it, but I have to acknowledge that I grew up, when I was a child, I branded cattle just on the other side of that border there. And I heard jokes and comments about the indigenous people and particularly Blackfoot culture. And, so part of the healing is to acknowledge one's participation, all that. All that noted, when I am down here, the reason I do this particular tour, I love Yellowstone. I love where I'll do my tour day. Yeah, tomorrow. Love it. But I actually do it to come here because I think it's very important. And I love the fact that I even bring business to a community like this. So I think that's really important. So peace and love, everyone. Hello from, not that it's something that needs to be necessarily celebrated, but I think this is the first time we've ever actually had a tour from a reservation. Yeah, I think Aisha's daughter's still in school. I would love to meet her. And Finn has been down here, but I don't think he's ever stayed here with me. So I'd love to bring him here. So, ladies and gentlemen, big hugs to all of you. It's an honor to bring you here. So again, please, if normally I don't say this, but put on your notifications, because if I can put on some last minute tours, I will, because some of this scenery is fantastic, and I do not have this trip planned again this year. Sadly, I mean, one year I did this 5 times. It's my, I will give up tours to famous cities to come here to Browning, Montana, because it's just, well, you see, and you feel so alive here. Merci, Alain. So I'd like to say, let me just turn around because it's just so perfect. So, I'm Stawich. Gracias, grazie, obrigado, toda, para mahalo, merci. Tupanantis karma. And also, I can say arigato, but it's a beautiful morning here, so I'd like to say ohayo gozaimasu. Have a lovely day, everyone, and I'll see about some photos along the way. And I just see if I have another. Here is just, by the way, the flag of this land here. So lots of love, everyone. And I'm going to go pack up the gang and head out down the road. And honestly, I will be drooling with the beauty of this drive this morning because it is actually this fantastic. So lots of love, everyone. Take care.